Welcome to Expats Listen with Ryan and Liz, the podcast where we share the ups and downs, struggles, and celebrations of living abroad.
Hello everyone, I'm Ryan. I am from South Africa. I am a psychologist and I live in Portugal.
And I am Liz. I am from New York and I'm a marketer also living in Portugal.
And today we're going to be covering a big topic. It's the story of how Liz and I met and what it's like to have a cross-cultural relationship in a third country.
So how we met, I was flying from Australia and I booked the cheapest flight possible with a layover in Abu Dhabi and then another layover in Muscat, Oman on my way to Nairobi, Kenya, where I was going to be moving to live with my high school best friend for a few months.
And I was on my way back from India after the final few steps of completing a divorce process. And I was going to be flying from Bangalore to Mumbai, and then from Mumbai to Muscat, Oman, and then from Muscat, Oman to Nairobi, Kenya, and then from Nairobi, Kenya to Johannesburg, South Africa, and from Johannesburg to East London, South Africa. So these were definitely the days where we were buying 500 little changeovers on our flights to save a minuscule amount of money.
So it's definitely something Ryan and I had in common, that we booked the cheapest flight possible. And that's how we ended up in Muscat, Oman. And when we got there, there was a man who was walking through the airport saying, "Who's for Nairobi? Who's for Nairobi? Follow me." So I follow this man because I'm going to Nairobi. And Ryan also follows this man, and there's a big group of us. And he takes us to a Dairy Queen. And we're at this Dairy Queen, and he says, "Hello, everyone. You are on the flight to Nairobi, Kenya." We're like, yeah. He's like, "Great. You have a 9-hour delay. You get a free chicken burger. Have a good day."
Not the best news to hear when you've got 25 more flights to catch and stuck now in the Middle East.
And I was in a position where I only had the one more flight, so I wasn't worried about connections. But I was definitely tired. Having come from Australia, it was over 24 hours of travel at that point, and now it was going to be 9 more hours in Oman, followed by that 5-hour flight to Kenya. So I was very, very tired and knew sleep was not going to come for a while. So me being me, the first thing I wanted to do was make friends. And I started chatting to the people in line. Where are you from? Where are you going? What's this trip for? All of this. And what did you think, Ryan?
Do you know sometimes where you are at a restaurant or in some general public place and there's an American person making a loud noise? Liz was that American person, and that noise was directed at me. And I remember the conversation being specifically about the choice and selection of available chicken burgers. And I was thinking to myself at that time how I was really not interested in talking about chicken burgers because of how traumatic the next few days of my life were going to be because this flight was delayed. But Liz had this huge smile on her face and she was so happy to be where she was. I couldn't help but feel better.
Aw, that's very sweet. I don't think I was necessarily happy to be where I was. I was just trying to make the most of the situation. And we're waiting in line, and as an American, I have a Chase Sapphire Reserve credit card, which, shout out to Chase, thank you, gives access to Priority Pass, which is lounge access in the airports. And at that time, in 2018, there was no limit to how many guests you could take. So I had recognized this man and his daughter. So they had flown from Australia to Abu Dhabi and then Abu Dhabi to Oman along with me. And the girl was maybe 5 or 6. And I recognized them because she was cute. And I say to this guy, "Hey, this might sound weird, but my credit card gives me lounge access. and we've got 9 hours to kill. Would you guys want to come with me to the airport lounge? And it'll be a little bit more comfortable. There's food and drinks. Maybe we could take a nap. What do you think? And his immediate answer was, yeah, I think that's a bit weird. And me, being me, and I think this comes as a surprise to no one who knows me, wasn't like, oh, okay, I'll just leave now, but was like, oh, well, how do I fix this? And I thought, I know, what if I invite more people? Because if I invite more people, then it'll be less weird, right? So I turned to the people around me and I'm like, you, do you want to join us and go to the airport lounge?
And I was one of those people, and I immediately suspected that I was about to become the subject matter of border security or banged up abroad, because this beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl was going to ask me to carry some very suspicious packages for her, and I was very much against that idea.
Yeah, so there was definite hesitation, but Ryan's weak spot is that he had his phone open and he was trying to connect to the Wi-Fi and it was not working. And I was like, oh, did you know that the lounge has its own Wi-Fi? So if you come with us, you'll be able to connect to Wi-Fi.
Yes, I'm very easily persuadable, and I think you got me there.
So I collect this group, and this man and his daughter say yes, and I get Ryan, and I get another man named Brett, and they all agree, okay, let's do this. We're in it together. We're all waiting for this flight. We've got these 9 hours to kill. Okay, we'll trust this random woman we've never met, and we'll go to the lounge. So we arrive, and I say, hello, these are my travel companions. We would all like to go into the lounge now. And they gave us a bit of a funny look, but nothing crazy. And in we go. So then we sit, and the father, his daughter, Brett, and I sit in these 4 chairs together. And then across the aisle, so giving us a fair berth, Ryan sits. Close enough that he can hear what's going on, but definitely a bit separate from the rest of the group.
So I took the classic introvert perspective on things by holding back and staying a little bit away while I tried to make sure that I was in a safe space with these people. Like, what were they like? Who were they? What were they into? And once I got an idea of what their general vibe was, I felt a bit more comfortable in joining in on the conversation. After enough time had passed, the alcohol started flowing. And in that particular airport, in that particular lounge, on that particular day and night, they had the most inexperienced bartender that I've ever seen. And she was a young lady and she had no idea how much alcohol was supposed to go into each drink. So we had gin and tonic, we had whiskey and Coke, we had shots of many different things, all of which were way beyond the accepted serving size. And it didn't take very long for us to start feeling the effect of it. And at that point, I think we started being as real as we could be with each other in a very serious sense.
I think we started being real and we just had no boundaries anymore because we were in this situation with these people that I know that I thought I would never see again. So here you are with these people. You have nothing to hide. You have nothing to pretend that you're cooler than you are or better than you are or anything. You're just in your hoodie and your sweatpants that you travel in, definitely like not looking your best, not feeling your best after 24 hours plus of travel, and can be open and raw. And I think we were all going through our own unique challenge at that time. So my mom had passed away only a few months prior, and my boyfriend and I had also just broken up. And it was this time in my life where I really didn't know where I was going or what I was doing or what I wanted or even kind of who I was without my mom this like crucial figure in my life anymore. And now here I am in this airport lounge with unlimited free alcohol with these dudes I'd never met. And we just talked and I cried. I was telling them about my mom. I cried. I was able to tell stories and tell things about who I was. And we laughed a lot as well. We were able to really go deep into topics and go in and out of things where there were no expectations and there were no rules. And I think the three of us, you, Brett, and I, really were able to bounce through that conversation in such an interesting way as these three perfect strangers who would never have to worry about anything because we were just going to go off and live our very separate lives after that day.
Yeah, I think we were all in a very important moment in our lives. And as well as it being important, it was very low for all of us. I think we had all been through some significant trauma and difficulty and pain, and life had brought us to that point. And it was a very low point in our lives. And I think it's almost beautiful where you're just at this very low point and you can throw your hands up in the air and just accept the fact that life was terrible and difficult and confusing and uncertain at that very moment, and you had people who around you who were feeling exactly the same way. And that kind of created a setup where the communication was brutally and vulnerably honest. And I appreciated that so much because there were no walls that we had up, and we were able to talk about those very difficult things we had been through without there being any fear of any kind of judgment that would actually hurt us. And a shout out also to Brett, who was going through his own low point, who had started a long distance relationship with a girl on the internet and had decided to meet her in Thailand. And shortly after arriving, I think it was a day or two after arriving in Thailand, she broke the news that she was no longer interested in him and he had needed to turn around and come back to South Africa. So Brett was definitely on the same level as Liz, who had lost her mom and her boyfriend, and myself, who had gone through that divorce. So there we were in Muscat, Oman, pouring our hearts out to each other under the influence of vast amounts of alcohol.
Yeah, and I think if we compare it to what we would have talked about on a date, if we had met in other circumstances and planned a date to go on, I never would have talked to you about my dead mom on our first date. I never would have talked to you about so many of the things, the issues that I was going through and some of the more dark parts of myself and some of the more ridiculous parts of myself that I was ashamed of. I think I wouldn't have shared those things. I would have tried to come across as cooler or more put together or a better version of what I really am. But because you were just a stranger in an airport, I didn't need to pretend to be anything other than exactly who I am.
It was a really good thing to be a part of because as a listener to you and Brett in that situation, I also felt as though I had the opportunity to be there for someone who needed support in a way that didn't have an investment in it for me, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I didn't feel as though I needed to be nice to you because we had any kind of relationship other than what it is that we were dealing with there. And I've got a very soft spot for random connections with people in international environments. So if you're traveling somewhere and you're going through a tough spot on an airplane and the flight attendant is super kind to you, for some reason that makes me feel so special And I felt like that was one of those experiences.
For sure. So the alcohol continued to flow. It was 9 hours, which is a long time, and you can drink a lot. So we were definitely feeling very good toward the end of that. And then Ryan took out his phone and said, let's take a selfie. And I was a bit brash. And for the selfie, I kissed Ryan on the cheek.
And I've got that photo, and it is printed and stuck on one of the walls in our house. And it was the first face-to-face contact that Liz had made with me, and I had made with her, and it's an important part of our history.
So then we were waiting to get onto the plane. Our layover was over. We left the lounge, and Ryan and I decided that we were going to sit next to each other, even though our assigned seats were not next to each other. And we just sat in two random seats. And then for the 5-hour flight from Muscat, Oman to Nairobi, Kenya, Ryan and I basically made out like teenagers the entire time.
I just want you to know, if you're imagining this romantic and gentle and special exchange of two people, it wasn't like that at all. It was super gross. It was us just acting like absolute heathens and savages on that flight and taking short moments between kissing each other to ask questions like, hey, what's your favorite color? Hey, what's your favorite movie? And that was our way of getting to know each other on this flight. And I am so sorry to anyone else who was on that flight for the horrors that they saw over the course of those few hours.
Yeah, so that was our flight to Nairobi. And then I was finished in Nairobi, so I went off and went to my best friend's house to stay with him. And Ryan continued his journey to South Africa, but he Facebook friended me first. So when I got back to my friend's house the next morning, I sent Ryan a Facebook message that basically said, hey, I really liked meeting you. Let's meet up. When are you free?
It was so direct, and for people who are like me, who are a lot more considered and careful and more interested in very well planned out plans, that was such a thing. And I thought about it for a while, and then I realized that I couldn't really reply to her immediately because, number one, I was trying to navigate my way back home after missing all of those flights. But number two, I wanted to think carefully about how I felt about Liz, especially after having just ended a relationship and knowing that she had just ended a relationship and that both of us were going through so much and we were both going to be starting new chapters in our lives. Was this going to be something that I was interested in doing? So yeah, I didn't respond for 3 days.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, he doesn't want to respond. I guess that's that. I thought it was over at that point. And then he sent this response, and it was so long, and it was so considered and thoughtful and sweet. And really, it was really kind and beautiful. And I was like, wow, this guy is something. So he sends this very long, sweet message, and I reply saying, okay, so are you free next week?
And I was free the following week, but it was quite a shock to the system of hearing that this woman was going to arrive and my life was going to change forever, regardless of what the future held at that time. It was a big deal that there was this woman arriving and expecting the start of a romance. And I don't know if I was ready for it, but then I also realized that I did have feelings for her, and I knew that part of having feelings for her was accepting the uncertainty of whatever was going to happen. And so I said yes.
Yeah, and my best friend who I was staying with was a little bit more skeptical about the situation and demanded to talk to Ryan first. So he called Ryan and had a very stern talking to that he must protect his friend. And my best friend Eric is wonderful in every way. physical strength is probably not his forte. Ryan would not really struggle in a confrontation against him, but the way that Eric put himself up against Ryan to say that he would protect me at all costs was so beautiful.
I really appreciated that phone call from Eric. I thought it was such a nice thing for a friend to do for another, because it showed how much he cared for you, and I kind of gave you more credit, not having known you that well at that time, for having such strong connections with people. So I wasn't really afraid of Eric. I think he's probably at about 50 kilograms. I'm at about 105. So if a physical fight did break out, I'd back myself a little bit. But I love the fact that you've got someone else in your life who'd be willing to put all 50 kilograms of themselves at risk to keep you safe.
So I booked my flight to East London, South Africa, a city that I had never even heard of before. And I had my hotel and I was ready to go and see what happens. And I think I wasn't looking at this as the start of a romance or the start of a relationship. I was just looking at this as, I like this guy, let's see, and maybe it'll be a fun 4 nights.
So Liz was coming to visit me in East London, which a lot of people recognize as being the Las Vegas of South Africa in all its...
Who says that?
Everyone. And no, it's actually a tiny little town in the southeastern corner of South Africa. And we have amazing beaches. We have great people. It's a very small town vibe. And we love surfing. So that's one of the biggest things that we've contributed to the world, some surf champions. And we also have a giant Mercedes-Benz factory there. And I love it because it's where I grew up. And that's where Liz came to visit me.
Yeah, I stayed in the thriving metropolis of East London for 4 nights, and I got to meet Ryan's friends and family and go to the beaches and eat some fish and chips, and really got to see his life a bit and learn about who he was outside of the setting of an airport lounge. And it was really great. And I think immediately we were both like, I like this person. What's this going to be? So I went back to Kenya and we started a bit of a long distance relationship where Ryan was still in South Africa and I was up in Kenya, and he came up to visit me a couple of times, and we met in the Seychelles once. I went down to visit him another time. And over those couple of months, we made a plan in order to turn it from a long distance relationship to an in-person relationship. And then a few months after that fateful day on the airport, I moved down to East London, South Africa.
And that was the start of our life together. I don't think that we had considered the permanence of the relationship and the commitment of it all. I think we just jumped into it and started making it happen. And we spent the rest of 2018 in South Africa. I was working at some of the motor manufacturers in South Africa as a consultant, and Liz was doing her remote work at that time as well. And we got to experience so much of South Africa as tourists. So I got to show Liz around different cities, and she got to meet even more of my friends and family and spend more time with them. And I think a lot of the relationship that we have right now was built during the course of that year. And I thought it was a great year for us, and I look back at that quite fondly.
Me too. I think especially dating someone from a different country, it's really great to be able to experience life in their country and see what it's really like and meet their friends and family and have that day-to-day of what they really experience and how they really live. And to understand the little nuances of why this supermarket chain is better than that supermarket chain, and where you go for fun, and why the mall is such an important place to South African culture as it is.
So that's a super interesting point that you raised there, and that is how it takes time to get to learn how people live in a real sense of understanding how their culture works. And I'm really glad that you had the time and the opportunity to see how South Africans do things, how we feel about certain things, how we think, how we express ourselves. Those are important things, and I think that might have helped a lot in you understanding me better.
Yeah, and I think that takes us perfectly to our first listener question that we get to answer. So, Anna from Portugal asks, what's it like being in a relationship with someone from a different country? What challenges are there that are different from dating someone from your own country? And what can you do to make the relationship work?
So there are a lot of challenges in being in a cross-cultural relationship and an interracial relationship for Liz and I. And one of the first things that jumps out for me has been communication, how important it is and how much of a challenge it can be, because we are two different people who have grown up in two different countries with two different cultures and two different sets of families, all of the above. And we were very different people. I guess we still are different people from each other. And the way in which we communicate, the way we form our sentences, the tone that we use, the way we conceive of ideas, all of those things are so different to each other. And not observing that in each exchange that you have with each other can end up being a real problem. And I think that one of the big things that we've learned over time is to be a lot more considered in the way in which we communicate with each other and not assuming that the other person knows where we're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part of communication and the struggles that we've faced is I think you take for granted that someone understands steps 1, 2, and 3 of something, and then you just start talking about step 4, but you didn't grow up in the same place that I grew up. You didn't have the same experiences that I had. So step 1 is completely foreign to you and you didn't understand it at all. And you're not starting there. So when I start at step 4, you're completely lost.
Yes, and starting a conversation at step 4 means that you have to fill in all of the information that you didn't know about from 1 to 3. And it's almost impossible to get that right when you don't have any clue where the other person started. And that is a great breeding ground for massive misunderstandings, which could potentially turn into arguments and fights. And taking that time to actually go through it from step 1 through to step 3, taking that time to actually go through it from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 is really worth the effort and the time, because it makes sure that both of you are on the same page throughout whatever it is that you're dealing with.
And sometimes you won't even realize that you're starting on step 4. I think that's the case for me all the time, that I think I'm starting on step 1, but I've made all of these assumptions beforehand, and Ryan needs to actually say, no, we're not starting at the same place, like back up. And then I say, oh, okay, let me back up, because actually I had missed those steps there that I just took for granted were already known.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is taking the time to consider what your partner is thinking. Because if you take the time to consider where your partner is, your partner will also feel more regarded and respected and understood, because they've got someone who's there, who's interested in understanding where they are coming from in that exchange of communication. And that, I think, is an opportunity for people to become closer to in their communication.
Yeah. The next thing I think is curiosity. So really coming with curiosity about the other person's country, the other person's culture, the other person's way of life, and just knowing that there's no better or worse. There's no culture that's superior to any other culture. And whatever you think you know about a country is probably not the reality of what your partner lived through. And I think this is the case for Americans for sure, that I think so many people around the world think that they know exactly what Americans are and how they think and all of this. And that's not my experience. I didn't grow up exactly that way, and I don't think that way. And just because you've heard a stereotype doesn't mean that's what each individual person believes. So you do need to ask. And it's the same for every other country. We make these assumptions that, oh, people from this country like this. People from this country don't like that. But that might not be true for your partner at all. So I think it's really important to come with curiosity and ask those questions and really try to understand their culture and also where they fit into that culture. And if they feel comfortable with these things, if they like or don't like these things, how they want to be treated, how they want to be spoken to, how they need to feel appreciated and loved.
Absolutely. With people who have connected with a partner from the country that they're from or from the neighborhood or just even similar circumstances and situations, when you've got someone like that with you, you can make the assumption that person has a similar way of thinking as you. And you have that kind of as a head start, as a privilege. But when you've got a partner who's grown up in a drastically different way from you, the only way for you to ever understand their context and how they think and how they feel and how they form opinions is for you to actually ask and for you to actually take that interest and display that curiosity by learning about them, because it gives you the different pieces of the puzzle to put together to better understand the bigger picture of that person. I think the next thing that has been a challenge in a cross-cultural relationship is compromise. And compromise in an expat context is a lot more demanding and I think a lot more challenging than it would be in the ordinary need of compromise, in the ordinary need for compromise in a general relationship. Because signing up for a life that is outside of the usual comfort zone for people means that you're hardly ever going to be able to have things exactly the way that you want them to be. And accepting that is a huge part of finding some level of happiness in a relationship, in a life. So for Liz and I, it's a big part of my drive towards being more spontaneous and being more adventurous and taking more risks, because if I was to do things the way that I would like to do them, it would be a lot more conservative and safe and predictable and quiet. And that isn't necessarily a good thing all the time for my development and my own happiness. And for me to harness the power in Liz's sails, I would need to compromise quite a lot.
Yeah, and for me, it's slowing down and being more intentional. I think I let the wind take me to most places, and living a life with Ryan means that I really need to take a second and talk about the decision of why we're going in that direction and make sure that it's intentional. And we want to be doing this thing and not just, let's just go and see what happens. But what are we choosing? And to slow down and actually choose what we're doing next.
Yeah, compromise, I think, is a big part of any relationship, as it is with all of these other points that we're talking about. And it's really difficult to get that right, because it's important to have boundaries for yourself. It's important to accept who you are. It's important to know what you need as a person, and then be able to draft some idea of where you're able to show some kind of concession so that it becomes a joint life. And it takes time, and it's something that we still work on day to day. We still get it wrong regularly. And I think that's a big part of what it is that we need to develop in the relationship as well as within ourselves.
And there's more fun compromises too. I think a good example is food. So Ryan is one of the best cooks I've ever met. And the food that he cooks is not food that I grew up with at all. And a lot of the food that I'm eating now is food that is not traditional to what I was used to, but it's a compromise that I'm so grateful for and that really has enriched my life.
Absolutely. I think I've really benefited from that too. I have never eaten this much cheese in my whole life ever before. And I have discovered new ways of consuming dairy products that have blown my mind. And that's been a fun journey too.
The next is the one that I probably have the most trouble with, and it's patience. Look, there's going to be a lot of misunderstandings, assumptions are made, and signals are misread. Language is another big part of trouble within relationships with people from different countries. If your first language is different from each other, there are going to be lots of things that you say, but you didn't really mean it that way, and the translation isn't really exactly what you meant. But even if you have the same first language, like Ryan and I do, there's still nuances in the way that things are said that can change the meaning of things. For example, in South Africa, it's common to use the word must. So you might say, you must go to the store now. But for an American, that sounds very harsh. I must go to the store? Excuse me, like, what are you saying? And I think patience really comes into play here, where you need to slow down, you need to take a breath, and curiosity comes back into it of, what did they mean? Did he mean that I am forced to go to the store in this second right now? Or should I ask a question? What did you mean there? And to understand a little bit better. And I think not jumping to getting upset with the other person and really slowing down and trying to understand is so important.
Yeah, I agree. On the other side of it is understanding that my language and my mannerisms and the way that I communicate isn't necessarily the most effective or efficient way of communicating, because it's not designed to be used in an environment outside of my home culture. So an example is, in South Africa, we speak almost bluntly. We speak pretty quickly. There's almost a certain level of aggression to how we speak, even when it's a humorous statement, even when we're joking or playing or talking about things that are not confrontational. And I noticed that when I speak like a South African speaks to Liz, she is offended. And after spending the time getting to know her and understanding how my communication works, I actually agree with her. And it means that I need to make that compromise and show a certain level of patience in how I express myself, so that Liz is put in a position where she feels appreciated and safe and heard.
Yeah, and that definitely goes both ways. There are definitely ways that I have communicated that Ryan gets a bit upset by, and I've needed to learn to adapt and to change and to really show that patience that doesn't come naturally to me, to be honest.
Yeah, these things that we've been talking about, these points of communication, curiosity, patience, these are things that everyone needs to go through in any kind of relationship. But being in an expat situation or an intercultural situation really does add a certain level of complexity and consideration that needs to be used so that you can actually function as a team and grow together and achieve things in a way that's sustainable and allows you to be happy. And I think Liz and I are still learning. We're still growing. There's still so many times where I know that I could be better in any one of those things. And it's just a case of understanding that we're human beings and we're all doing our best, you know?
Completely. And the last one on our list is celebrating. And I think this is a great one to end on because it's so important and it's something that you and I have been trying to do more of. And I think it makes such a difference in our lives when we're able to do it. And there are so many hard things in an intercultural relationship. There are so many hard things in being an expat. There are so many hard things in life. And it's so rare that we take the time to truly celebrate the good things, because there are good things too. And if all we concentrate on are the hard things, then I feel like our lives aren't as rich as they could be. And to really take that time and celebrate the good and to make a big deal out of the good things really brings so much more joy and happiness to life.
I've noticed that the other thing that tends to affect us is concentrating on the next thing that we want to achieve. So we do something, we achieve something, we gain something, we win something, and we're just thinking about what it is that we want to do next and what the next challenge to overcome is. And after we achieve that, we have a moment of relief, but no celebration, and then it's on to the next achievement. And taking that time to celebrate the small things that we do really makes such a big difference to the amount of happiness that we experience in our day-to-day lives, because something good happens pretty much every day, and taking that time to actually enjoy that is such a good step towards some level of sustained happiness in our lives.
All right, so that wraps up our discussion for today. And now we're going to move on to our Would You Rather. And I'm not doing a random selection this week, because I think it's going to be an interesting showdown for this particular episode for us to do the USA versus South Africa.
I already have all my answers. All of my answers are South African.
No, they're not. I don't think so. But let's see. Okay. So, Ryan, would you rather eat a pizza in the USA or in South Africa?
The best pizza that I've had was in New York. The pizza that makes me feel the warmest is in South Africa. A shout out to Guido's in South Africa. If you're out there and you need a good piece of pizza that's warming and comforting, please go to Guido's. Keep that business alive.
I am obviously choosing New York. I'm definitely biased as well, but I think New York pizza is great.
I love a $1 slice more than anyone else in the whole world.
He does. And I really don't like the $1 slice, and I want to go to just a little bit better of a pizza place. Can we just spend the $2?
That's pizza for the people.
All right, next one. Would you rather go for a hike in South Africa or the USA?
I would rather go for a hike in the USA. The reason being is that I've done enough hikes in South Africa, and I feel like in America, the choices that you've got in terms of hiking is really diverse. And that's not to say South Africa isn't diverse. That's one of the best things about South Africa. But there's a lot that happens in the United States, which I don't think a lot of people actually give that country credit for. So you can go on a hike in the middle of the desert. You can climb a mountain. You can do a coastline. You can go through thick forest. You can go through wetlands. And all of it is world class. So I would do that, yeah.
I would also choose the US, but I'm agreeing with you that hikes in South Africa are incredible. Like, I've hiked up Table Mountain, I've hiked up Lion's Head, I've done some really beautiful and incredible hikes in South Africa that I've loved. But I think just like sheer size and scope, there's so many hikes in the US that have such different terrains that I would choose there. I think this is another obvious answer, but would you rather see the wildlife in South Africa or in the USA?
South Africa, hands down. I think what I really like about the wildlife in South Africa is how accessible it is. Since having left South Africa, I've been shocked at how few animals I've seen, because as a South African, when you grow up there, for some reason you tend to find yourself around antelope and zebras and warthogs just randomly, and I didn't realize how special that actually was, because now living in Europe, I think I saw a fox a couple of months ago, and that was my wildlife sighting for the year. And in America, obviously they have great wildlife too, but in South Africa, being able to like just go a few minutes and meters outside of the city centers, you're able to see like the big five. That's a big deal. So I choose South Africa. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm choosing South Africa too. I think while there is great wildlife to be seen in the US, especially in some of the smaller places, I just don't think it has that wildness of seeing an elephant in the wild is just something that is a phenomenal experience. Giraffes are definitely up there in my favorite animals ever. And just being able to see a giraffe from the side of the road is one of my favorite things in the world. And I'm definitely choosing South Africa.
Giraffes are certainly up there.
Okay, next one. Would you rather ask for directions in America or in South Africa?
I would rather ask for directions in South Africa, because you're going to get an experience out of it. I promise, if you ask a South African for directions somewhere, you are going to hear a story about where you're going. You're going to find out why you're going there. You're going to learn about who's there. You're going to be questioned about where you're coming from. There's going to be a lot that you're going to go through, and you're probably going to make a new friend in that process. So I would say South Africa.
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing here. I am from New York, where people are thought of as less friendly than other places in the US. So maybe I'm biased there. But I really feel like just striking up any conversation in South Africa, people are like, oh, wait, who are you? Where are you from? Like, what are you doing here? And I think there's so many times where I've asked an innocuous question and made a friend in South Africa that's my choice too. All right. Now, this is a controversial one that I am interested to hear your answer. Would you rather eat street food in the USA or in South Africa?
So I think the United States has street food culture locked down because the variety is great and the quality is also awesome. So being able to enjoy Mexican food, South American food, Indian food, Chinese food, all of those cuisines are readily available on the street in most places. And I think I've got that soft spot, especially for Mexican food, which is super, super cool.
Oh, he's picking America. I am too. Honestly, like, American street food is, for me, tops. Like, street food in the US is phenomenal. It's diverse. It's everything I want in street food.
I will say this about South African food. I don't know so much about street food as much as South African home cooking being absolutely phenomenal. So in South Africa, if you go to someone's house and they've cooked their food for you, that is like one of the ultimate luxuries in life, but it's different to street food.
Okay. Would you rather live for 3 months in the USA or in South Africa?
I would do 3 months in the United States, again, for the same reason why I would choose the US for hikes. Because there's so much variety, because there's so many things to see and do, and so many things that don't make it into the press and the tourist brochures in the United States. So, yeah, I think that you could experience a lot in America in a very short period of time. So 3 months, I think you could get a lot done, especially if you're there during summer or spring.
Where would you base yourself?
I think that's a really good question. I would probably end up somewhere on the West Coast, close to maybe more of the nature reserves and national parks, and maybe do like a road trip between all of those national parks. So a few years ago, Liz and I did a fantastic road trip through Bryce Canyon, the Grand Canyon was there, and Zion National Park. And that was absolutely mind-boggling in terms of how beautiful that was. And we did all of that in a few days.
Yeah.
So there are many more national parks and interesting things to see. We went past the Bonneville Salt Flats, which was amazing. So many of the Utah desert locations were beautiful in their own way. So there's just so much to see and do there. So I think 3 months would be pretty amazing there. And you?
This is actually a really tough one for me. I feel like there are a lot of places in the US that I could really enjoy. I feel like 3 months in like Bend, Oregon could be amazing. 3 months in New Hampshire or Vermont, I think would be really beautiful. 3 months in Alaska, I think could be an incredible experience. Oh, I also really like Cape Town. And when we were in South Africa, we didn't really spend a lot of time in Cape Town. And I feel like 3 months there could be really, really great. This is really, really difficult. I think I might go Alaska. So I think I'm going to choose the US and to choose to live for 3 months in Alaska, somewhere that I know nothing about, that's super remote, super different, and just a part of the US that I've really never explored, but find interesting. And I know that the natural beauty and the hiking experience there just could be out of this world great.
But I think that's a good point that you made there, is how different all of those options are within the United States in comparison to staying in Cape Town or Durban or Johannesburg or East London. Because if you are to stay in any one of those South African cities, you're going to get a similar-ish experience of general South Africa. And like it will change. Obviously, Cape Town has got a specific flavor, so does Durban, so does Johannesburg. But you would generally get a South African experience, whereas I think in the United States, it would certainly be an American experience, but the definition of it would be so much more unique based on where you locate yourself.
Yeah, that's true. All right, next one. Would you rather visit for a long weekend in the USA or in South Africa?
South Africa. Because I think in a long weekend in South Africa, you can get a lot done. You can eat a lot of delicious food. You can see a variety of things that you would generally take a lot longer to see in another place. And I also just love South Africa.
And I'm choosing my home as well. I'm saying a long weekend in New York is the perfect amount of time to spend in New York. It's expensive, so you don't want to go for so long. You might not be able to afford it, but a long weekend in New York, you can go to Broadway, you can eat some amazing food, you can walk through Central Park, you can rent a city bike and ride all around. I think a long weekend in New York is really amazing. All right. Would you rather do a road trip in the US or South Africa?
I would do a road trip in the US because you get to see a lot of stuff along the way. In South Africa, there tends to be much smaller places between the bigger cities. And it's not to say that those places aren't absolutely gorgeous and interesting. They're just maybe often not as developed and as well supported. So I think in America, you can take like legendary road trips. Like you can do Route 66. There's national roads that take you between massive tourist attractions. And yeah, that would be quite an easy choice for me.
Yeah, I think I would agree on this one. I think the U.S. is made for road trips because it's such like a car society that a lot of places are built around that. And there's so many stunning road trips that you'd be able to take. Yeah. All right. So the next one is learn the language, but I'm going to change it up for this since the U.S. and South Africa speak the same language. Would you rather speak English with the accent of someone from South Africa or the accent of someone from the USA?
What do you say first?
So I would definitely choose South Africa. Ryan's accent is incredible. It was like one of the first things that I thought when I met Ryan. I was like, oh, listen to him. And I remember when we first started talking on the phone when I was living in Kenya, I was like, I could just listen to him speak all day. Like he could talk about nothing. It's just so beautiful. Listen to him speak. Oh my God, I love it.
That's very kind, Liz. I would choose the South African accent too, not because I don't think that the American accent isn't good. I think I've kind of been overwhelmed by the American accent over the course of my life because I get to hear it in everything that I see or do. So American accents are in all the music that we listen to. American accents are in all the movies, TV shows, everything on the internet is American. So it'll be nice to hear a little bit of the South African accent a bit more because we're a much smaller nation in terms of numbers and in terms of exposure to the rest of the world. So whenever a South African has something to say when we're out here in Europe, I always get so excited to hear that accent. So I'm going to stick with that as my choice.
All right, last one. Would you rather buy a house in South Africa or the USA?
Oh, that is such a tough question because you're bringing into the limelight a lot of economic and political and social issues of where I would commit. And I think for me right now, I would say South Africa, because I would view it more as being a holiday kind of destination for me rather than a place to live, because I'm quite happy at this point living in Europe. And if I was to leave here and go to another home that I owned, it would probably be in Cape Town, South Africa. And you?
I'm also picking Cape Town. I think it would be amazing to have a house in Cape Town and have a place to go back to and stay while we're there. I'm also going to be very honest. I don't think we could afford a house in the US. So I'm choosing Cape Town because I think it's a more affordable option. It's also a gorgeous city. I think we both really like that city and would love to spend more time there.
If ever you're looking for a underrated, underappreciated, but spectacular and incredible experience, I would wholeheartedly recommend going to Cape Town. I think it's one of the great experiences travel-wise for people. And yeah, that's just my vote for that place. And that's the end of the podcast for today. I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your time, and we had a really great time sharing with you. If you have any questions or thoughts or ideas, please hit us up at Expats Listen on Instagram or on expatslisten@gmail.com. We can't wait to talk with you again. Cheers.